Hey everyone, welcome back. So a couple of weeks ago, TheWhat Show uploaded a lengthy video where he discusses how he would fix underpowered and broken weapons for Scout, Soldier, and Pyro. If you're unaware, weapon rebalancing as a concept has become a bit of a meme over the last several months because of one rather baffling video from a different creator. That video was not good. It wasn't thought out very well, and it made a lot of weapons even worse. TheWhat made his own version, which was received significantly better, and after watching the whole video myself, I can say that he has a better understanding of what the game should be like. That being said, he still made some rather silly suggestions that I want to discuss. The main problem that I have with his video is that he mostly suggests either very heavy alterations of weapons or complete reworks, to the point where it feels like he's actually talking about a community server with custom weapons. Another issue that I found with the video is that situational weapons are treated like a bad thing, as if every weapon needs to be viable 90% of the time, which led to balance suggestions on weapons that don't need them all that much. Today, I just want to focus on Pyro. Even though I have a decent amount of playtime on Scout and Soldier as well, I just don't feel confident commenting on all of the balance changes that he made for those two classes. Maybe another time. And one final thing. All of his weapon segments are divided into problem, solution, and goal parts. I will be mostly focusing on his solution parts. The link to the full video will be in the description below. Let's begin with the first Pyro weapon, the Phlog.
The Phlog's biggest problem isn't even Pyro, it's medic. Pocket flogging is one of the easiest and cheapest methods to pub stomp any lobby. While pocket flogging, you get to have full crits and complete invulnerability to damage at the same time.
So far, we're in agreement. I personally don't struggle with pocket flogs that much, since I've learned a couple of things on how to counter them or how to avoid them, but this kind of teamwork is still obnoxious to play against, since you have the combined extremes of dealing massive AoE damage and taking no damage at all. So how will he fix this?
While under the effects of the oomph meter, you can no longer be overcharged or overhealed. Boom! Pocket Phlog is gone.
I think he's onto something here. I wouldn't mind the Phlog having a penalty related to friendly medics, but to deny overheal and ubercharge completely is a step too far. I think just removing the ability to get ubered would suffice, since an overhealed Pyro would still be a threat, but one that a team of players can deal with much more easily compared to an invulnerable Pyro. Next weapon.
The Scorch Shot requires no aim, inflicts ungodly amounts of afterburn, and has the ability to stun people. Something needs to change, so I elected to just give the Scorch Shot a full rework. And this is one of my most extensive changes so far, so hear me out. Now, the Scorch Shot charges its projectile like the Huntsman. The projectile speed of the Scorch Shot increases the longer the shot is charged,
with its maximum projectile speed being the same as the Manmelter's. The shot can be charged for a maximum of 1.2 seconds, after which the projectile will be automatically fired. The damage direct hits deal will also scale with how long you charge the projectile for, up to 50 damage at maximum charge. And maximum charge projectiles also create an explosion, similarly to how it does now.
This really isn't necessary. I mean, the point of the weapon is very clear. It's supposed to be a noob-friendly secondary. Pyro as a class is already noob-friendly, so it makes sense to have an item like the Scorch Shot. The problem is that it does too much for too little effort. I think that removing the stun from this weapon is a must, because the stun ensures that you get hit the second time by the bouncing flare, which deals mini crits and resets your afterburn. As for the afterburn, I think it should be nerfed to either 2 or 3 damage per tick instead of 4. Everything else can remain the same, no need for a convoluted redesign of the weapon.
I also massively increased the push force you take from self-damage, allowing yourself to get to heights around the same as a rocket jump would.
We don't need to give Pyro a tool for rocket jumping. Pyro is supposed to be a low mobility class, and even then, you still have 3 choices. Either use the Detonator for doing smaller jumps, while still having a weapon to fight with, the Jetpack if you want to cover more distance, but at a cost of having no secondary guns, or alternatively, you can air blast enemy projectiles to rocket jump.
Here is the goal with this rework. What I'm trying to do is make the Scorch Shot reward precise aim more and make the item overall much less spammy than before.
If you want to get rewarded for precise aim, just use the flare gun.
The Detonator. This item is already perfectly viable and a great item in its slot, so I'm not going to be changing it too much, but I do think it could use some small buffs, particularly in the mobility department. You may be aware, but there's actually a pretty cool exploit you can do with the thermal thruster that allows the user to perform stomp damage without having it equipped. Now, while blast jumping with the detonator, you can perform stomp damage, and I also reduced self-damage from detonator jumping to 30%.
I don't think the detonator needs a stomp feature. Yes, the stomp exploit can make for some very entertaining frag clips, but this would make nobody want to use the thermal thruster. You can perform Axtinguisher combos and stomp enemies with this weapon as well. However, the reduced self-damage penalty is definitely something I can get behind. I think it would incentivize more people to use this weapon for mobility purposes. What's the next weapon?
The Gas Passer.
I'm very interested in this, because the Gas Passer is arguably the worst weapon in the entire game, barring man vs. machine. It was supposed to be a crowd control item that would discourage people from interacting with your gas cloud, but the weapon takes way too long to charge for a barely noticeable effect on your game. You're basically playing without a secondary weapon for most of the match, if you have this equipped. So let's see how he fixes that.
Make the gas debuff actually scary. Here's how I accomplish that. The gas debuff no longer wears off the second you're ignited. The effect will last until the afterburn inflicted by it wears off. So if someone is doused by gas and lit on fire, the gas debuff would still be active until the afterburn runs its course or is cancelled by healing. The next change is adding a new effect to the gas debuff. While the gas debuff is active, all healing you receive is reduced by half, and medibeams from medics and dispensers cannot extinguish afterburn caused by the gas passer. Boom! Now the gas debuff is an anti-healing tool. Now, that healing you receive is reduced by 50%, and it's also harder to heal off the effect using medics and dispensers. This makes you vulnerable and creates an opening for the enemy Pyro and team to act on the gas. It also creates a good counter for pocket medics, as a Pyro can bombard a medic in their pocket with a big smelly gas cloud and reduce their healing, making them susceptible to your attack.
All of this sounds very obnoxious to play against. When you mess that much with people's healing rate, and when you throw Eternal Flame debuffs at them, that's just not fun to play against. We don't need to turn this into a Warframe weapon that applies multiple debuffs at once.
What the fuck is this?
Admittedly, I don't know how to balance this weapon, but I think we should start with smaller steps first. Just make the weapon require less damage to charge, and make the gas cloud stay up for longer. If the cloud remains active for more than 5 seconds, it arguably would discourage people from pushing through a choke point. But who knows really.
There's one thing I won't deny, and it's that using the thermal thruster can be very clunky. And a lot of that clunkiness comes down to the deploy and holster animations. Unlike every other item in TF2, the thermal thruster is the only item to have a dedicated holster animation, which means you can't rapidly cycle through your items like every other loadout in the game. The holster animation is there in place to prevent you from using the thruster and switching your weapons instantly after jumping. That much is fine, but the problem is that this animation plays even when you're not jumping. So let's fix that. Now, the thermal thruster's holster animation only plays while you're blast jumping with it. And the item also deploys 25% faster too. There we go. That's all it takes.
Honestly, I got nothing. I agree with his summary of the weapon's problems, and I would fully support these changes.
The Manmelter's main strength is the stored crits you gain from extinguishing teammates. But what if the enemy team doesn't have a Pyro? What if the enemy Pyro sucks and they can't light any of your teammates on fire? What if the enemy Pyro is too good and they kill everything they touch, so there's no one left to extinguish? This extinguish mechanic relies on so many variables out of your control, it causes the item to be very unreliable. There's one niche use case where the Manmelter shines, and it's combating Scorch Shot Pyros.
First of all, the weapon doesn't always need to be useful. I'm mainly a flare gun user, but I love frequently using this weapon as well. The Manmelter has its place in the grand scheme of TF2's chaotic gameplay, and that leads me to my second point. No, fighting Scorch Shot Pyros is not the only time this weapon is useful. That's just a misconception popularized by the fish stick on a stick. It's very common to have Pyros on the enemy team, and if just one of them holds W mouse 1 into 2 or more of your teammates, you just need to pull out the Manmelter, hold mouse 2, and slide into your burning teammates. You get healed for extinguishing their flames, and a few stored crits for your weapon.
I started by letting the Manmelter penetrate enemy players to be consistent with the other Dr. Groidbort weapons. I also gave it a big buff to its main upside, as now, for every 150 damage you deal with your primary or melee weapon, you gain 1 stored crit.
That second part is just too powerful. Dealing 150 damage as a DPS class isn't exactly difficult. This is like making a Pyro version of the Diamondback. Ignoring this second buff, I'm honestly not sure how I feel about letting the weapon penetrate enemies. The Thompson and the Bison can do that, and it's not a super powerful mechanic, but then again, they don't have a way to store crits for high velocity projectiles. Again, I'm not too sure about this one, but maybe it would help if every secondary hit was a mini crit instead of a crit. You be the judge.
And despite being a direct upgrade over the stock Fire Axe, the third degree is one of the worst items in the game. If your first instinct when you see an enemy medic pocketing someone is to pull out your melee weapon and run straight towards them, 9 times out of 10 you are gonna get dumpstered.
It's just fun, alright? It's just fun to assert dominance on enemy players by killing a pocket pair with only your melee weapon.
Sure, technically the third degree only has an upside on paper, but in practice, the upside is the downside, because it encourages you to play like a bloody moron.
Okay, if you've seen my videos before, you probably already know that I'm a big third degree enjoyer. There is sort of a strategy to using this weapon. My personal approach is to first damage the enemy with my flamethrower to not only lower their health, but to also reduce their healing received due to them being on fire. After a second or two, that's when you should go for the killing blow that will hopefully smite both the healer and his patient. But even if only the medic dies, that's still very satisfying. But okay, I understand what he's saying here. The weapon's damage output is heavily influenced by random crits, which I personally dislike. I would love if this could be turned into a combo-based weapon for countering pockets, so let's see what ideas he's got.
Upon hitting an enemy, all enemies within a small radius will be struck as well. If you hit 5 enemies with a single swing, it will deal mini crit damage to all affected players. But it can no longer deal random crits, and if you only hit 1 enemy with a swing, the base damage is reduced by 25%. There we go. Now, the third degree is a weapon that's better for attacking multiple opponents at once, but is much worse for one-on-one encounters.
This is one of the most ludicrous weapon suggestions I've ever heard. No offense, but this is just broken. First of all, a radius of 250 hammer units is huge. I'd argue that's an even bigger area of effect than the typical distance between medics and their patients. But more importantly, this is just obnoxious. A melee weapon shouldn't have such a large AoE attack. Remember back when we were talking about the Phlog Pyro being cancer to play against because of pocket medics? Well, this would be a very similar problem if a Pyro gets his own Critskrieg medic. He would just need to ambush one person near a choke point or an objective, and suddenly everyone nearby would take 195 damage instantly. That's unfair and unfun to play against. No offense, but I have to ask what you were thinking with this one. This is ridiculous.
There are so many items dedicated to fucking over Spy for no particular reason, and the Homewrecker has gotta be one of the most egregious examples of this. The Homewrecker is an item that punishes good spies for successfully doing their job, and I just can't help but feel like that's a bit unfair.
I agree. There are a lot of items that counter Spy specifically, and the Homewrecker is one of the most egregious examples. Pyro is already a hard counter to Spy, so although it's an interesting ability to have on Pyro, he should not be able to remove sappers in one hit.
The Homewrecker is able to destroy every building in the game with 2 clean hits, which sounds nice on paper until you realize that most of these buildings are plopped right next to a sentry gun.
It's a secondary buff. It's there for fun, it doesn't need to be super useful at every moment. When I'm using the Power Jack, I'm using it for the movement buff and not for the healing on kill. But hey, if I'm in a safe position, like behind a scoped sniper or something, I don't mind going for a melee kill to get some health back. For the Homewrecker, I use it in a similar fashion, where I destroy buildings that were left unattended anyway. In rare cases, I try going for a mini sentry kill, since they die in one hit. The point is, it's just dumb fun. The primary use of this weapon is to remove sappers.
The Homewrecker can no longer destroy sappers. Instead, hitting a sapper with your Homewrecker will instead temporarily disable the sapper's ability to deplete health or reverse construction for 5 seconds. After those 5 seconds are up, it will resume sapping as normal, and sappers can only be disabled 1 time each. The second change is that while deployed, you have a 50% resistance to all knockback and air blast.
The first change seems unnecessary. I think it would be too weak, since it's only useful if the engineer is nearby, which would then kind of defeat the purpose most of the time, since the engie can just remove the sapper himself. I think a much more reasonable approach would be for the Homewrecker to take 2 or maybe even 3 hits to remove a sapper instead of 1. That way the Pyro would actually need to decide which building is worth saving instead of being able to save all of them. The second change is rather wild. If you want to make this an anti-sentry weapon, then we shouldn't turn it into a general anti-knockback weapon. Just give it knockback resistance from sentry guns and we're good.
So how do we make the Neon Annihilator better? Well, making it less reliant on water to function is a good start. Turns out the weapon that's only useful in water is a bit hard to justify using in a game that canonically takes place in the New Mexico Dust Bowl. It's not exactly a water park.
Again, there is nothing wrong with situational weapons. The Neon Annihilator is a gimmick for maps with water, and that's perfectly fine. It gets the job done.
Got rid of the ability to remove sappers, and now it crits while blast jumping or using the thermal thruster. Pyro Market Gardener. Fuck it, why not? That's all I gotta say, moving on.
I'm sorry, are we cosplaying as a Trolldier now? Just play Soldier if you want to play like this. Or go through the effort to learn how to use the Axtinguisher in combination with the Jetpack. I don't like this at all, just keep the weapon as is.
The Axtinguisher is great and all, but its damage output can be a bit unreliable, and it makes securing kills on light classes feel inconsistent. Sometimes you do everything right and perfectly execute a combo just for your victim to be left with single-digit health.
That basically means you didn't do everything right. Just flame them with your primary for half a second longer and then go for the killing blow to avoid this issue.
I decreased the damage penalty from 33% to 25%, and that's all. This small number tweak is all it should take to make the Axtinguisher more reliable for killing light classes.
I don't like this. I think it's just completely unnecessary.
It's time to carve out a new use case for the sharpened Volcano Fragment, and here's how I'm gonna do it. Now, every time you hit an enemy with the Volcano Fragment, they will be marked for death for 1.5 seconds. On top of this, every time you hit an enemy with the Volcano Fragment, it will also increase your universal switch speed across all weapons by 20% for 1.5 seconds as well. But it can no longer random crit, and I slightly bumped up the damage penalty to 33%.
As he goes on to explain, this change would turn the Volcano Fragment into a reverse Axtinguisher, meaning that you're supposed to hit an enemy to apply the debuff, and then quickly swap to another weapon to finish the job. While combo weapons are nothing new for Pyro, I'm not certain how well this would work out. On paper, it almost sounds overpowered with the Degreaser, since that weapon by itself has a 60% faster deploy speed. The 1.5 second buff from this weapon would presumably stack. Then you would have a reliable way to make enemies take 30% more damage for several seconds, including your own flamethrower and shotguns. This would be quite devastating against heavies in particular, since they can normally tank a couple of crit flares and extinguisher swings, but this is more akin to a mini backburner without an equally harsh air blast cost. I don't mind the idea itself, but I think a couple of restrictions would need to be placed. The final weapon that gets discussed is the Bitch Slapper. The main issue is how this weapon deals very low damage and it's split between 2 consecutive slaps. It can't achieve much even as a meme weapon. Let's see how he would fix it.
Third consecutive melee strike always crits. You heal 35 health for every successful slap, and the speed bonus has been increased from 1 to 4 seconds. Look, even mega buffing the Hot Hand like this isn't gonna let it compete with the likes of the Power Jack or Axtinguisher, but at the very least, the Hot Hand should be fun to use now.
He's trying to turn this into a dedicated damage dealer, as opposed to a last resort, but then he also gives it strong utility in the form of healing 35 health for each slap and getting a 4-second speed boost on a hit. This would allow you to very quickly kill light classes. 3 slaps would accumulate 140 damage in less than 1.5 seconds. That's very strong for melee. On top of that, you would heal over half of your max health back, and get a speed boost to more quickly retreat to safety. I think the damage changes should be trashed. It doesn't sound fun to play against this at all. However, if you could still use the weaker damage of this weapon to land a finishing blow, and get rewarded a smaller amount of healing, as well as a speed boost to retreat to safety, I could see this working out. It would be like a more proactive version of the power jack that is used in combat, not outside of it. The Axtinguisher already gives you a speed boost when you get a kill on a burning enemy, so the bitch slapper would need to distinguish itself as a more utility-oriented option by giving you a longer speed buff and some healing. And that's all of them. Overall, to me this video left a lot to be desired, but at the end of the day, both my video and the video that I'm critiquing are subjective. Everyone plays the game differently, everyone has different expectations from the game, and everyone's level of skill, particularly with specific weapons, is different. All of that shapes our opinions. So if you believe that I myself made some bad arguments, I would be more than happy to hear your thoughts in the comments to further unpack some ideas. Thanks for watching, and take care.